Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. Today I thought I'd throw like a wild card out there. I think this episode is going to demand that you get ready to create a vision in your brain and hold it in your brain for the entire episode. And then we're going to orbit this image and talk about it. It's going to be a micro repeat of various concepts in other videos, but I think that one, it's good we revisit this concept, and two, I think it's good that we look at it and create new connections between the pieces. It's sort of like if you were to look at two televisions side by side and you think, oh, that's one television. Then you zoom in, you realize there's a seam in the middle. And then you're like, oh, there's two televisions. Well, then let's look at one of them really close. And you realize there's LEDs. And then you zoom into that. And then there's multiple LEDs. Oh, now there's RGB, red, green, and blue. You keep going down and down, right? And you keep seeing more because you keep zooming in. Eventually, you might come to some atomic thing that you don't understand, but you just see energy whizzing around, and you're like, God, that's it. And when you go deep enough, this is what you see. But this episode is going to be about us, what we are. Because I think we have it wrong. And I think we've had it wrong forever, what we are. Now, when I say wrong, I am going to be talking about our physical body. We can only speculate how our consciousness interacts with this body, how perhaps that consciousness could be referred to as our soul. Again, the problem with saying some of these words is that they are heavily usurped by religion. And so if I say soul, you're like, oh my gosh. If I said God, people have a problem. I'm talking about the universe when I say God. Everything, me and the universe and everything is God. That's how I think about it. But God as one syllable, so I say that instead. So what's the vision? And I haven't seen every piece of artwork people have done. I haven't seen everything that art students and special effects students have done. So maybe someone has created this image and it's just out there in a YouTube video. And if it is, then great. Send it to me and we'll all meditate on it. I truly think I was given an epiphany from the universe, one of those agnostic Easter eggs, when I saw Eric Dollard define gravity as the negative space between ethereal winds. You're talking about 20 years of my life, probably almost 30 years of my life, clicking instantaneously, at least 25. Everything made sense, or a shit ton more made sense than ever made sense before. And I mean, you have to understand, from the age of 18 to 28, I was furiously trying to develop a unified theory of the universe. But the problem is that all the bullshit physics that's out there, all the theoretical models that are out there, did nothing but make sure that my brain could never figure it out. Once I heard Eric Dollard read back these old texts by the masters, and he showed a graph of two objects blocking ethereal winds, between each other, and that compensating for a negative force, a negative pressure, which creates orbital gravity. As it is above, so too is it below. Clicked. There aren't different physics at a macro level than there are at a micro level. And that's the beauty of the whole thing, man. Bart Sibrel, like I said in a previous post-interview statement, he said, well, you know gravity's there because bubbles are in water. And I'm sitting there looking at this going, sure shit is. And how does a bubble get created? What is a bubble? It's not matter pulling against matter. Is it? It's a clump of air stuck in a thicker substance called water, and the water pushes on the air, creating a bubble. Oh my God. But it's a pull in outer space, right? Everything's right in front of your face. Everything super duper goddamn simple is right in front of your face, and we're just not seeing it. So lame. When I started this series, I don't think I knew this. And so I've got shows out there. If you cut together what I've said, it's going to be some potentially contradicting statements. It's very fascinating that that's the case. The epiphany I got was looking at a current in water and realizing that spin, and this is nothing tremendously new. I mean, the Hadron Collider has been doing this. The colliders in general have been doing this forever. We classify energy at a particular state as a particular object in space-time. You would say a neutron, electron, a proton. Okay? That's not new. But looking at it as in a water metaphor is fascinating. Now, what you have to be able to do is extend your mind. So when I say a current in water, there's all kinds of currents. That word is used a little too much, but what I'm talking about is the currents that yank you down underneath the water. Usually happens at a bridge, right, where the support beams come down and block the flow of water. What's happening in a linear way there, when the water hits the pylon, little tiny orbital tornadoes are happening in the water. You can just see them. They have dark impressions because they have that little, funnel that goes down. Now, what you have to do in your brain is to lift that two-dimensional thing out into a three-dimensional sphere and understand that this is happening in all dimensions, up, down, left, right, cross. You could just take a ninja sword and cut a tomato in any direction as long as you go through center. And that's the vector of push that is also pushing. Now, you have to trust me here. All matter in the universe is made of one thing: ethereal winds, ethereal particles. Ethereal particles have no charge. They are not positive, they are not negative. They are simply particles, and they simply move extremely fast. Again, Faraday and Tesla said they moved at 50 times the speed of light. All right, we don't really need to know how fast they move at this stage in the conversation. What we need to know is that when water bangs into the pylon underneath the bridge, it creates these tornado currents. Well, what is a pylon in the universe if it's full of ethereal winds? It's other pylons. It's other ethereal winds. Anything can get together and create a little bit of a party. Starts creating magnetic orbital currents in 3 dimensions. Your electron current. Once that starts happening, it starts tricking all the other ones to follow suit. The dielectric energy, which is the ricocheting vectors of particles hitting each other and just bouncing straight off, they start getting tangled in there as well. And this is where we start building the atomic designations that we call atoms and all the different pieces and parts. Quarks, it's the same theory going further down and further down into the maze, but it's all a fractal. All right? What makes an electron exist is the same principle and the same stuff that makes every other discernible particle that man has ever fabled to have discovered the same thing. It's all the same. It's all the same. Why is light different? Light's different because It is truly a verbal reaction. When all these orbital patterns get disturbed by a cause, there's an effect, and the effect is a gigantic release, I think, of transverse energy. Now, there are some theories that light is also longitudinal, which means instantaneous transfer. I'm not sure. Pretty damn sure when we slow down light going through the Coke bottle, that's a transverse wave. It's not instantaneous. You can watch it crawl. Okay. So what are we? What are we if these are the building blocks of the entire universe? Right now, cosmologists and I don't even know what you call these other folks, the people that are studying classic electricity using ethereal models, because we can call them ethereal scientists, they are fighting a holy war to bring back the notion of ethereal winds. That's what I'm doing, right, in my little ghetto way. So the problem is if you think about any theory that's ever discovered, you need a time to form the theory, to get everyone to buy into it, and then you apply your wisest minds to it, and then you find out what you can do with it. We didn't used to eat peanuts out of the ground. Most countries had banned tomatoes because they said they were poison for the human body. From what I understand, the skin is not good for you. It goes on and on. Well, do you think caveman knew that oil was combustible to any effect of creating, I don't know, refined gasoline and then a combustion engine, so on and so forth, high octane this, high octane that? Probably not. It took a long goddamn time to acknowledge that these things were flammable, and that when you create an explosion, it creates force, and then let's make a combustion piston, we need an O-ring and an air valve and a little spritzer spark plug to pop it. And so what can we start doing if we just take the ethereal theory and just say, yes, that is true. Boom. Now, what are we? To draw a model of the human body in some sort of three-dimensional form, we would need to take every single piece of atomic designation that we have temporary control of, right? Everything in the human body renews every 7 years. So you only have temporary possession of the atomic matter that makes up your body. And that's before you get into ethereal winds. I can only keep a cell 7 years? Not really. You can only keep what the cell creates with 7 years, because cells usually live about, I think someone said it was, just a few months. It was like 3 to 4 months. They get replaced. But now let's go deeper, because the metaphor continues. It's a scientific reality. We are nothing but a ton of currents in water. Everything that we have temporary control of, well, it's not really there for any length of time. What do I mean? Let's go back to the gravity episode. You've got a current that's just persistent in the river. You're just looking right at it, that tornado thing, right? You could even do this in the drain of your sink and the drain in the tub. You pour some food coloring in. You watch it go down the drain. Now the current stays there. It stays and maintains its form. But for a second it's purple or whatever. And then it goes down the drain and it's gone. But the current's still there. Okay. Ever wonder why your double helix, your nucleic acid chains, you ever wonder why they are in some sort of spiral? Why there's so many spirals all over the place? The golden mean, the Fibonacci pattern. It's because the overall growth pattern is influenced by these spins that happen on all levels, right? You can look at a big giant cactus that's like damn near 2 foot in diameter. The ones with the little tiny teeth that spin out from the center. It's an amazing, gigantic Fibonacci pattern. Look at a seashell. Look at a rose, the way that the rose petals come off. Look at the way the thorns go up the stem and spiral towards you. Man is probably one of the most asymmetrical things out there. We're pretty good on the outside, but our insides are all asymmetrical. Stomach on the left, liver on the right. The intestines are kind of, they go down really intense on the right side and they come way up on the left side. Not very symmetrical. But now just imagine one of those images of like proto-man, like take Prometheus, the guy at the very beginning of the film. He's got no hair for some reason. And you just strip him down and just make his every pixel vibrate and oscillate and orbit, and then figure out that all the ethereal winds that exist in the universe have to go through this guy, and all of his designations, everything that he has temporary control of, gets a spin. And then he gets to exist. His lady friend, same thing. And it's probably spiraling in a million different directions, right? As I move my hands and my fingers, right? There's most likely some vector in which, my finger ejects the energy that's coming through it. We talk about massage on this show and how it's important that people touch you, right? Maybe that's a reason why. The laying of hands. Man, that shit is real as it could possibly be. You can pull stress right out of a human being with very little muscle tissue movement or anything. But now that's the physical form that we really focus on, and it's probably good that we have a fairly concrete idea of how our bodies hang on to themselves, right? Now what's interesting is when you study electricity and how electrons move, you will get this definition of how an electron actually jumps on a conductive surface from atom A to atom B, or atom 1 to 2 to 3, and it's hop, skipping, and jumping. But then another one has to fill its place. And it's this skipping, this trading of electrons that gives us the stimulating surface on a valence, that gives us a conductive wave that will shock the shit out of you if you grab the power outlet and you're wet. Okay. We got to keep coming back to the phrase. As it is above, so too it is below. And we got to reverse it every once in a while. As it is below, so too it is above. What could electrons teach us about ourselves? Because you might ask yourself, well then, okay, if all these currents are happening, then how does stuff stick together? What's a nuclear bond? I mean, why does splitting an atom seem to make a big popping noise, right? If nothing else, we have to solve for how we're all glued together. All right. How does a sweater stay together? How does a fabric become a fabric? How does a rope become a rope? I mean, wasn't it all just kind of, could be made of cotton balls? Could be made of silk weave? I mean, yeah, that stuff kind of sticks to itself, but come on, how did you make a huge bedspread out of it? We wove it in a loom. But you might be saying, well, you're cheating. You're taking really stationary looking stuff and you're weaving it inside and out. And hey, that's man weaving. And there's many weaves in the world. You're telling me that the universe has a weave? That could be a pretty funny joke. We're talking about string theory? I don't think so. But there's probably some similar principles and thoughts in that realm. But if a conductive material shows us a very blatant exchange of nuclear matter that is going in a magnetic orbit, the only reason why it becomes electric and becomes electromagnetic is because it bounces into the dielectric force, or the dielectric ether that bounces off the center, right? We don't need to worry about those details. We do not. But if a bunch of currents get together in the water, and I've seen this, they dance around. How many of you have played around with the drain when you were a little kid in the bathtub, or you filled the whole sink up, and you get these little micro tornadoes? You'd pull your finger through through the big one, and you pull it back towards the water that's draining, and you get all these little micro ones. And they only last for a little while sometimes, but sometimes one, there's two of them that circle each other. You get a binary tornado system. Once you have one disturbance in this fabric, you're cooking with gas. It's sort of like when you start a motor in a car before it had starters. You go around the front and you crank this crank, wham, 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 and all of a sudden, boom, you get combustion in the engine, and you're good until you turn it off. Again, if there's something wrong with our cars, we always find out when we turn them off, right? It won't start. Okay, but the universe can't turn off. There's nothing out there to turn it off. It doesn't have an off switch. Luckily for us, there is an object that behaves like an atom. And it has a nucleus, which I think the gentleman who built Coral Castle was probably correct in saying that it had a photon in the center. Something probably very strong, thus probably very violent in its center. And because it is so intense, it keeps its neighboring ethereal winds very loyal to it, which is where we start getting what we perceive as stationary matter, which we write in equations as M. Now, we know that there are laws of physics, you could say. I even hate saying the word physics today because it's so at the root of what is wrong with this world. But we know there are true principles of physics. We just do. Or at least we can use them as mechanisms to predict whatever is actually taking place, right? Like we can calculate, generally, the force of gravity. It's not technically correct, but it's correct enough, right? We know what terminal velocity is. We know how to build rockets based on gravity and plane wings and jet engines. So we've got it 99.9% dialed in. Good enough, man. So these objects hold themselves together through their orbital rules. And when you look at everything up close, let's say you were able to zoom yourself into one of these cores of an atom, and you got these special sunglasses on so you look cool and you don't lose your eyesight. It's some crazy furnace of moving ethereal winds, potentially, as Faraday and Tesla said, moving at 50 times the speed of light. Now, some of you are old school. You're going to be like, that's impossible because E equals MC squared said, okay, just lose that shit out of your brain. Okay, that was planted in your mind to screw you over for the rest of your life. So you simply had a barrier in your brain, a religious barrier that said, light has this limitation. In the medium that we view light, it generally has a particular speed. But that speed is varied all around the world due to environmental conditions, probably the density of the earth wherever you're measuring it. You could probably measure, I don't know, you might, if you climb to the center of the Everest, you might have light travel a different speed than if you were, say, flying at 80,000 feet with nothing below you, not a mountain or anything, right? So different gravity bubbles and negative forces might affect the ability of the transverse wave to travel, probably the medium it's going through, air, water, or whatever, right? Anyway, the next thing you have to do with your brain is understand that once you have a Lego block, you can start building other higher constructs, other things. Now, those of you who've seen Legos in your lifetime, you know that there is actually a Lego that is one Lego big. It's 1 unit high. It only has one little nipple on it. And if I gave you 1 million of those and said, build me a boat, here's 1 million, build me a boat. Well, you'd be hard pressed because it really grows only in one dimension, up and down. You can't go left, you can't go right. You're going to go up and down. So the most that you could possibly do is to create ropes out of this stuff and somehow pray to God they stay together and try to tie them all together. You'd have to probably use glue, burn them and melt them together, and you could maybe create some rope out of those one-dimensional Legos. All right. But what if I gave you a two-dimensional piece? It has two little nipples on top. It's 1 unit high. I just gave you magic. Now you can create the boat. Isn't that amazing? Because you can go left and right, and you can create a labyrinth. You could create solid matter with those things. Yeah, you'd have to kind of loop it around itself because it can't quite, do what a brick does. But it's pretty damn close. Again, if you study Stephen Wolfram and his gigantic book called A New Kind of Science, he will teach you that the unit of 3 and 4 is paramount to the universe. Now take our Lego. If I made you a Lego with 3 units and another Lego with 4 units, now the infinite complexity of which you could create is pretty much at your disposal. It's infinite, right? All right. So with very little entangling of this ethereal wind, you can start building the entire universe. And you can be devoid of any patterns with just a distinction of 3 or 4 individual sizes of units. Best way to think about it is a 4. You've got a 1, a 2, a 3, and a 4. With those Legos, you could build anything. You really could. At some level, it will be pixelated, right? How many times have you seen someone build, like Han Solo out of Legos? From 50 feet away, it's like, Jesus, looks like Harrison Ford. You get close and you're like, what is this? Oh, back up 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet. Oh, it's Harrison Ford. Got it. Good. Okay. I think most of you know if you took your high school portrait with an electron microscope, no one would know who you are. And that's the way we have to think about things. But we are this humming, phosphorus thing. Every single moment that you exist, and let's just go with that, 50 times the speed of light. That means that within 1 second of time, the amount of ethereal winds that potentially pass through you to be you, to keep you, is damn near infinite. I mean, in terms of you trying to count how much passes through you in 1 second, which is an eternity when it comes down to this sort of, nanosecond kind of stuff, right? It's phenomenal. What sort of unit of math will we have to develop to really think about, to take the pain out of our brains of thinking about things moving 50 times the speed of light? And that's pretty damn fast, right? So then light itself seems pretty damn slow. 1/50th of the speed of the matter that creates the Coke bottle is what you can see going through the Coke bottle because someone stimulated the verb, the ripple in the water that is light. Can't have a ripple without water. Can't have light without ether. You just can't. But now let's go to the human body. Technically the most primitive version of the human body is the current in the river. I'm just going to keep repeating these metaphors in your brain so you don't lose them. Except you're times, I don't know, 1 trillion? You have 1 trillion of those little things in you? Easily? Probably, 100 trillion, quadrillion. Who knows? Doesn't matter. If we have the universe itself coming through us, renewing us, like I've indicated in other episodes, and it just will not leave me alone, inside the packets of energy that are ethereal particles, right? Again, they don't really have any positive or negative charge, but inside them, their configurations must account for, or at least provide a medium for, information. So what's that mean? Well, a lot of us are hive-minding right now, like crazy. We're open to new ideas, and therefore we are receiving. It's really a matter of, it's sort of unlike tuning to a radio station with your radio. Maybe that's the way it works, but I would like to suggest a different metaphor, which is that you've been hearing white noise your whole life. You don't really hear it, thank God, because otherwise you go nuts. Although I have some rocker friends with massive tinnitus who would argue with me, but I have a thought, let's just say, wherever I am in the world and whenever I am in the world, and if you happen to be in existence downwind from me, which could be omnidirectional, right? You know, when you make a big noise, isn't it amazing how the big noise goes away from center like a ripple in water? It's not going in one direction. Maybe that's the way it goes. I don't know. The more we want peace, the more we can make it happen. The more that the press, especially the fake media, I mean to make this political, but if you have propaganda coming in you 24/7, you're manifesting reality, and it's not a joke. It's not even a metaphor. You really are making reality happen because you're injecting lies into people's brains that they amplify all around the world. It should get a little scary if you really contemplate what I'm telling you here. But the good news is the inverse is also amazing. And thankfully, whoever created us imbued us with certain dispositions that you might call common law. We don't want anyone to harm us, and therefore we inherently understand why we don't want to hurt anyone else ourselves. Raise your hand if you've read the study that says the people can sense when they're being looked at. I did in, I think, the evolution episode, I have been researching this for years, and the more I got into electronics, the more I got into light, the more I believe this in a huge way, which is because our brains are sort of a Fibonacci shell, right, out from the pineal gland, and because our eye sockets are these caverns inside of our skulls, our nasal canal maintains all of our ability to articulate. How many times have you had someone do one of these things? And I have a girlfriend that does this to me all the time. She'll want me to listen to her. The common complaint between Mars and Venus. And she says, she starts the sentence off looking straight at me. We'll be in a loud place, right? And then she'll answer it by turning around, looking the other way. And now all of a sudden I can't hear her because the sound's over here and it's over there, right? And I'm always going, what? Like an old man. I'm like, so then she'll do it again. She'll look at me and finish 2/3 of the sentence looking away from me in a really loud restaurant or a loud public place. And so I have to grab her shoulders and go, don't look away from me. Tell me to my face. It's very loud in here, right? And some people will actually take their volume down as they talk if they get nervous. I was getting a coffee the other day, and this kid was trying to ask me, I forgot the hell he was trying to ask me, but he asked me, and he just like that. And I was like, what? Well, do you want to? I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't hear. It's where someone's using the fucking blender off to the right. And so I think, that's just a couple funny digressions on this theory, but the idea is this. The human body is designed to pitch every piece of frequency out the front of our skull. It really is how we were designed when you take the upper construct of sound and perhaps overt thought. And the reason why I think people can feel you looking at them is because your skull from your nose is just like, it's just like the toucan, right? Follow your nose, man. You're looking at someone and you are pushing a lot more thought. You're probably pushing out the back of your head too, but you're pushing a lot more focus on that person. And if you stare at someone, you're people watching, you are putting a lot of analysis into people, not just staring in their direction. I could go to the beach and stare at the water, and I'm actually staring at 100 people. I'm not sure all those people are going to turn around and go, someone's looking at me. No. If you're some creeper at some park and you're looking at some housewife, she's going to go, I'm by myself. I was feeling really comfortable reading my book while my kid's playing over there on the swing set, but now I feel awkward. Everyone's worried about death. A lot of people are, right? books about it. Friends of mine who claim they're so tough buy me these books about the fear of death and then tell me how brilliant the book is and how accurate it is. And so I read the book and I'm like, wait a minute. This book says that whoever believes this believes that we're utterly terrified of death. And that if we don't have a fear of death, then we have a psychosis. We're broken, right? So stupid. But anyway, it's godless people who fear death. It really is. Again, I mean the universe. But now, how would we introduce into our vibrating current body, okay, made of all these rules that govern everything that you see all day long, how does our soul get in there? Are the thoughts that we have just chemicals in a bag in our brain? Does ether explain the brain? Because we appear to have an identity, we appear to have memories and a lot of infinite storage at our disposal. Is it merely because the hard drive is so teeny tiny on a microscopic level, on a subquantum level, that it's just all in there, but we can't track it? I'm going to say it doesn't appear so. It's funny because if you read Kurzweil's books, where he believes he has cracked the code of the human mind and the chemical chains, the fucking books are full of constant speculation. It's just as bad as reading a David Icke book with, 80% channeling other people's, whatever, Lemuria or Atlantis or something so that you can lock down something about the Rothschilds. I mean, it's just like hokey shit, right? Hats off if you can find any truth in that stuff, but I can't, personally, right? I'm not going for a cold gypsy reading, right? I sense that you feel weird, Oh, wow. Amazing, Nostradamus. Maybe it's your mustache, lady. I think, personally, that, and I'm not by any means profound, but I adopt the theory that is shared among other people, that our soul rides our body, probably not dissimilar to a person riding a horse, or to be more accurate, sort of a Tron Legacy light cycle pilot who's just kind of gets on the back of this bike as Sid Mead originally designed it, and he just becomes a part of the bike. It's ubiquitous. It's also sort of symbiotic, right? When you die, anyone who can remember that experience, I did just meet someone who had a near-death experience, but you pass away, and if you do have any visions, you are seeing yourself on the ground and you're floating, as if you came off the bike, right? And no one has any fear, no one has any pain. In fact, quite the absolute opposite of everything that everyone fears about death is the fucking unanimous experience of everyone who has a near-death experience and has anything to say about it. They have an absolutely euphoric, super-duper lucid, sometimes adventurous experiences. So what do we have to fear, man? Right? That's a digression statement, but I don't know. I used an analogy in season 1, I'm sure, somewhere, but I probably did it once. Let's repeat it as we end season 3. Take your fingers off one of your hands. If you preferably have missed any, if you're missing any fingers, use the one that has all 5, with, I guess, 4 fingers and a thumb. And extend your fingers down like a little teepee and place them on a surface. It's really nice if you can do it on a glass table, especially if you can explain it to someone else. Let's pretend you're doing it on a glass table. I know that most of you can see this in your brain because we all dream. You can imagine this inside your head. Imagine it perfectly. That's because you're way more than any scientist has ever told you that you are. But as your fingers make contact with the glass, when you look underneath the glass, you can see your fingers being, flattened out. Imagine that the tips of your fingers touching the table The table is the medium by which we exist in this universe. It is the fabric of ethereal wind that is this particular form of life. And your fingertips are the souls that have now combined with that plane of existence to create us, to give birth to us. The reason why I like the hand is that it keeps a central unit above 5 souls. Now, of course, I'm not being literal about 5, but think about it. That's a hand on the outside of this analogy. The tree of life comes back up to the palm. Now, have you ever felt like your best friend has been your best friend in other worlds, other lives? Perhaps you find the right spouse. Man, you don't have to keep every boyfriend and girlfriend you have to have this feeling. There's this idea of a soulmate. Maybe, I don't know. Sometimes you'll have a kid, and you'll swear to God, they have personality traits of your ancestors. And of course, there's genetic programming that can definitely make that occur, for sure. But what stops the hand from picking up the finger, the index finger, moving it over half an inch and putting it back down, and being reborn into the same universe? Now, I have no idea, obviously, how this actually occurs. But I do believe that when you look at a dead body in a casket, it's a very healthy experience. And I think the reason why the ritual was created was so that you could see the vessel without a soul and feel it. Feel that there is no soul in that body. It doesn't mean we shouldn't honor the body. It just means your loved one's gone from that body. It might be standing right next to you while you're doing the whole open casket thing. We need to advance the discussion, in my opinion, of how ethereal winds would affect what we are. And we also need to have the courage to acknowledge what is actually occurring in our sight, in our hearts, right? When you see a body that's alive, it has a feeling. When you see a body that's not alive, it has a different feeling. And what's interesting is, if you think about the Pavlovian training, I used to teach my students this. If I sat one of you down and had a really high-res picture of your loved one and flashed it in front of your face, I personally believe that the brain for a split second believes that they're there. Depending on the, how it's presented to you, the lighting's correct and it's not, being blown out by a sun behind me or behind you or whatever. For a split second, your brain thinks that they're there, and then your brain has to go, oh no, that's a photograph. I think if you were to go up to some of these tribes out there and show them a picture of their wife or their husband from the tribe in a really high def printed, 2600 DPI super duper color laser writer with gloss finish and a controlled lighting experiment, they're going to be looking at that photograph like a cat looks at something in a computer screen and tries to go around the screen when it jumps off the screen. We see this all the time in animals, right? So here's the thing. When you see someone in a casket, and this still relates to what I'm talking about here, it's your ability to sense what's there and what's not there. That's what I'm trying to get at here. Pavlovianly speaking, unless, open caskets are usually reserved for folks that are fairly normal looking when they pass away, right? You're seeing someone sleep is sort of what you're seeing. Especially if the makeup's done right and the hair is done correct and the clothes work out. I've been to some pretty young funerals in my lifetime where the person's face was perfectly fine. That's some serious stuff. But my brain, for no microsecond, no nanosecond, had to negotiate what I was looking at. And when you first come up on a body that's in a casket, you feel like it's not your loved one. At least I do. But then when you look at them, if you have the time to do so, it's them. It's totally them. There's nothing wrong. They didn't get it wrong. They didn't get the hair wrong. They didn't get the face didn't change shape. It's still my buddy. But my brain and my soul and my mind knows it's not them. People who work in hospice, I used to have a good friend in this, they'll tell you, when you find someone in their bed and they have passed, you can tell just by looking at their face, just by going up next to their body. You can tell they're not there anymore. You don't need to feel their pulse. You can, but you don't need to. You know what's going to happen. Of course, you have to confirm at some point. I think that is sort of the clue, the proof. And David Icke does a great bit where he talks about his mother passing, and he said, I've had a big giant picture of her made for the funeral, and I said, that's my mom in that photograph, but she's not in this room. She's not in that body, If our souls are riding piggyback on our body, then it's interesting. It might explain dreaming. It might explain why we have to sleep. Maybe. That even the soul needs a break from the body. There's a really weird thing that can occur when you miss sleep, and you've all experienced this. You lay down at night, and you're exhausted. Got your eyes closed, and you keep them closed for 99% of the entire time that you got in bed at midnight and got out of bed maybe at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning. But for whatever reason, you never fell asleep. But you kept your eyes closed, right? For the most part. And then you get up at 8 o'clock. Maybe you've had 5 hours of sleep, but you really needed the full 8. But what hurts? Your eyes hurt, right? Your eyes hurt and sting and burn like you had them open all night. But you didn't. You had them closed. They should be completely moisturized. And you weren't necessarily rimming, so they shouldn't be tired. You're just kind of staring straight ahead with your head on your bed. So why do they burn? I'm not sure about that. What do they talk about? What do they talk about when they talk about the eyes? The eyes are the windows into the soul. What if that is way more literal than you could possibly imagine? Now we know how eyes work physically, from the retina all the way back to the visual cortex. And we're not quite sure how the wiring, but we can mess with the visual cortex. We can watch what you're thinking, watch what you're seeing. Every once in a while, by the way, you'll read that paper about colleges and various research centers that have been able to look at what you're imagining. And I find that a little hard to believe, but, I believe the last one I saw actually had physical, photographs. I once was spending a lot of time programming a couple of years ago. Maybe a little more than maybe 4 years ago. And I was just staying up late, and I was working like 12-hour days on this special project of my own. And I would go to bed, and I'd be up 36 hours. And I'd lay down, and you've heard me talk about this kind of experience for a while, but I was really super duper studying how my brain was processing the process of being utterly exhausted, because I thought, like I said in an episode that will air after this one called Dream Development, or Developing Dreams, I forgot what I said. Anyway, trying to sense yourself actually falling asleep, staying conscious through the transfer from consciousness to dream world, and watching the process happen. Like you're getting on a subway and it's just all the stuff's going by the windows, right? And you're like, damn, light speed, right? But what I was trying to sense was my consciousness, which I would also refer to as my soul. I tried to recognize where it was in 3D space. So here I am lying down in a bed, lying down on a pillow. I like those foam pillows where it's larger on one side and it's not support your neck. That's what I sleep on. I dig those. Recommend them for everyone. But I'm laying down, and my consciousness felt like a teardrop that was measurably behind my skull, like hanging way outside the back of my skull, probably, 10 inches out the back of my head. And it was almost as if I was so exhausted that whatever was holding my consciousness to my body was going, we got to get out of here. We got to get out of here. This kid's got to get to sleep. I don't know if you got a chance to hear that. That was a cat. Small footnote. I worry about you guys driving and hearing crap like that because it can freak you out. I don't want you to wreck your car. But in one of the sessions I had, this vision just popped into my head. And they say when you're really, really tired, your right brain has gone to sleep. Your left brain's gone to sleep a long time ago and your right brain is taking over. So you will get more creative thoughts when you are really exhausted. A lot of artists will force themselves to stay up, or even scientists, or theoretical scientists, they'll stay up really late to keep their right brain dominant. Maybe that's why I'm creative, because I stay up really, really late. I'm up right now. You can't hear any birds, right? The occasional cat freaked out about probably a possum. But the vision I got was an orbital pattern. It doesn't make any orbital sense in my brain, because if you had two colliding orbits, they're only going to cross over for a very short period of time, not for a prolonged period of time and then get out of loop from each other, right? But maybe some weird elliptical orbit would, overlaid on top of a circular orbit, would account for this. But it was as if my soul was saying, we have to orbit out from this thing. We have a cycle, like the sun, like the earth around the sun. You see it all the time. But I kept feeling my consciousness fall out of my skull. It would fall and then it would come back, and fall and it would come back, right? So we fall to sleep. You ever wonder where these little statements come from? I mean, I suppose as children, we think that when someone says fall asleep, we're thinking about someone falling down and going to sleep. I think as soon as you hit the ground, you wake up unless you're drunk, right? But falling asleep is an interesting concept, right? You ever get in your car in the morning? You're showered, you got your favorite clothes on, you packed everything perfect into your car, and you hop behind that steering wheel and you feel like you are one with your car. Totally one with your car in a way that you command it. And then you drive for 12 hours. Or you have a nice 2-hour commute in LA. Start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. And you feel one with your car, but it's more like you've melted into it. And your ability to command it is compromised, right? Maybe you're just tired too. All that compounded. You're bored to death. And then what happens? You go and you rest, and you get back in the car the next day, and you feel like $1 million. You're totally engaged with the vehicle. Could that be a clue? As silly as that analogy is, could that be a clue of how we engage ourselves? Well, think about how you have the mastering of your body if you sleep in, a Holiday Inn. You wake up the next day and you're willing, you're ready to negotiate a trade deal with China. And then after, 18 hours of consciousness, you are barely able to, stand up while you're peeing because you've just lost it all. There's a Westworld analogy to this, but I'm going to use Star Trek instead. In the series Voyager, which was mid-90s, they had a holographic doctor, which was actually, I think, a concept pulled from probably some old sci-fi novels, but it was actually really beautifully dramatized in Red Dwarf, the British comedy series, sci-fi comedy series. But the holographic doctor had a dilemma at the very beginning. He was not supposed to be on for prolonged periods of time because, as Westworld would call it, fidelity starts to waver, meaning how accurate do you remain who you are? As if the programming, it's just not meant to do this. And when the doctor's case, he wasn't supposed to amass that much experience inside of his core databanks. He was supposed to come in, triage, go back out, and be reset. And then the program just keeps going and going and going. But it keeps getting reset. What if it was something as simple as this? The soul lacks fidelity with the body. It can only be directly attached to the body for a certain amount of time. And then it has to let go so that it can get back on the horse the next day, crawl back behind the car, steering wheel the next day. Maybe the body is just such a chaotic, turbulent thing that as you hang on to it, it moves you, right? And I forgot, there's got to be like a couple analogies like that where there used to be that thing that was the tube, looked like a fleshy tube, and it came out in the late 80s, and they're full of water. And it's an inverted tube of water. And you try to hang on to it, and it just slips out of your hand. And you grab it, and it just slips out of your hand because it's an infinite loop. It's a Mobius strip of a balloon. Well, imagine that's sort of how it happens. You get on the horse, but the horse sort of morphs out from under you because it is a moving thing. It is the ethereal wind construct. It is mankind. So we got to separate, and we got to come back. And that's why we feel so good in the morning, and we feel so lousy and discombobulated in the evening, because you were just trying to hang on to those handlebars. I'll give you another analogy. It's a little silly, but anyone has driven a motorcycle that was super powerful, or you've talked to people who have. I've had this experience personally once. You get on a motorcycle and you floor the shit out of it, right? You get a big open highway, whatever it is. It is so powerful that, you pull back on the throttle. It's so powerful that it starts to pull away from you. And you feel yourself falling off this bike. And because you are trying to hang on to the steering wheel, which is also a throttle on one of your hands, you're increasing the throttle, increasing the force, but trying not to try to hang on to the bike. If you could just hop off and float and then let the bike go down in its speed because you're no longer giving it throttle, and you can hop back on, and hey, you're back at 20 miles an hour. It feels pretty good, right? I keep trying to figure out why we have to sleep. I still don't know why your eyes burn. I don't know. What's making them burn? Seriously, what's making your eyes burn? The only thing that makes sense to me is when I stay up late and I go a 36-hour shift with my eyes open. I've added another 12 hours onto an already 24-hour day. Hey man, I typically don't try to stay awake more than 16 hours a day. I don't try to do that. Sadly, it happens more often than I'd like. There's all these mysteries right in front of us. All these mysteries. But we're so wrapped up in bullshit in this world, we don't pay attention to anything. One of the huge benefits I have by doing this show is that I keep visiting it and visiting it. Sometimes I revisit things because I need to do another episode. I feel like, hey, let's do a part 2. We won't necessarily call it part 2, but it'll be a part 2 to a previous episode. But what I find is by doing, the course of a year, 100 episodes, 150 hours worth of stuff, I keep it really lucid in my brain. I continually analyze it. And it just changes the way I see the entire universe now, like I've said in previous episodes. I'm hoping that this is having an effect on you as well. And I'm hoping that regardless of your academic certification, right, by some college that's going to give you a piece of paper, regardless of all that crap, I hope that you're able to understand virtually everything I'm saying. It's easy to understand, and that regardless if you've ever touched science in your life, you are capable of saying, I get it, that's cool. And again, I want you guys, when you hear this kind of stuff, if it seems a little hard to follow, do me but it seems interesting to you, right? If it doesn't seem interesting to you, I'm not trying to force you into this. But if it's interesting to you, but you're like, man, I didn't really follow it, please listen to the episode enough times that you get it. And, you can ask me to describe things for you in more detail if you're like in the comment section on YouTube and you're like, look, I dug this episode, but what the hell were you talking about when you were talking about this, this, and this? I will explain it in words until you get it. And there's a reason to my madness here. Let's take the image of your 1950s Leave It to Beaver housewife. Okay? And she graduated high school. Maybe she got her degree. Don't know. Doesn't matter. I'm mentioning her for a reason. I'm not sure any of you are her, because I don't know if that job's available anymore in this world. But let's say you had someone like that, and for whatever crazy kooky reason, she found this show. And this interests her because she's like, look, I'm really, really smart. My family's got a lot of brilliant people in it. I got pretty good genetics. I haven't been repressed by society. And so I've lived a really good, untension-filled life, right? And she's listening and listening. I think that calm brain, that calm mind with all of the accoutrement of brilliance that all of us have is the most likely brain to hear one of these deeper theories and go, oh, you mean life is like this? And she comes up with the metaphor that is 50 times better than anything I've ever told you. Hopefully she'll get on the keyboard and type it in, and we all get to learn. So if you are more complex than that life, you're some technical person. I don't mean necessarily computers or electronics, but you're technical in what you do, right? An athlete is technical in what they do, right? You're meticulous. You have moving parts and talent and skill, and you work it all together into some mishmash that is your talent and your love. Then I think that it goes both ways. One, I think you'll have a lot of metaphors in your own brain and your own history to take these theories way further. The only the only downfall that you have, potentially, is indoctrination. If you hug E equals MC squared, you really are going to science class with a, Hannibal Lecter muzzle on your face, right? You look like the album of Quiet Riot. You're gagged. You're in a straitjacket. Your brain isn't invited to think when it needs to and it wants to. It's hungry. And I hope that this show consistently rips those shackles off of you. If nothing else, rips the shackles away from you. You don't have to listen to my stuff that's trying to be put on you in terms of another paradigm, another maybe potentially shackle. But my theories are hopefully always open-ended theories that go, there's the frontier, guys. Oh, it may have limits out there, but I don't see them, and I'm not trying to get you to see them. There's that funny CG of someone creating a city in the clouds. It's brilliantly done in China. There's like a city up in the clouds. It's beautifully done. I mean, it's definitely a special effect, people. But what if that was real? What if that was real? And once a year, let's just romanticize this into a story. Once a year, a big giant fog front comes in to China, wherever, Half Moon Bay. And in that one day, and whatever it is, 2 hours, 30 minutes, you can see a whole nother world up inside the clouds. And it is beyond beautiful and happy and brilliant to your mind. You're looking at that going, what the fuck? How is there a city in the clouds? And of course, someone who's going to own a plane or a helicopter is going to go visit. Just think about the euphoria going through your body. I mean, hopefully you don't have a missile system. You don't need any Nagrathea experience, right? But you go up there and you just land somewhere. You're in a whole different world. And you know that if you make it, so say we all know the window's 30 minutes. It takes you so much time to scramble into your plane. Maybe take a helicopter specifically because it's more strategic in landing. And it takes a while to get the altitude. Maybe even as you approach it, it starts to kind of move back because the clouds start disappearing. But you manage to land on top of a building top, land on the street, and you look back behind you and Earth disappears. Wherever they go for that 365-day thing, because they're only there for 30 minutes once a year. You're in it for 1 year. You're on a tourist trip way up inside the clouds. How exciting is that, right? You meet a whole other, I don't know what the hell that is, right? Maybe it's heaven. Maybe it's just some crazy, eccentric people like in BioShock, right? They've created a city in the sky or a city in the ocean. And you get to visit. I want these theories to appeal to you like that. A whole new frontier of thinking. It's going to make you think in ways you never thought before, but it's also going to make you think of things you've never thought before. From the abstract to the specific. From the unbiased to the bias, right? My encouragement to you is to say, it could be. That's sort of how I put it all down on paper. It could be this, it could be that. Eventually the could-bes will solidify. Things will connect very powerfully in your mind. And that's when you're really cooking with gas, man. You become a new expert in how things work. I've been privileged in my lifetime to handle technology that the world hasn't seen yet, and I'm like maybe one of 20 people in the world who's ever seen a particular form of technology for the very first time. So I'm like an early adopter. I get in early and I become an expert at it very, very quickly. And I know all the limitations of it. I'm a creative person, so I can use it in ways that the original creator never intended. And so the creator's excited. Oh my God, I birthed a child. I'm like, yeah, man, this is great. Keep it coming. You keep making the tools. I'll keep making the solutions, right? The experiences. Well, it's just like that. You open your mind, you see a new frontier, you hop in. I mean, isn't it cool? If you had a really long commute, the cool thing is you could listen to this episode a couple times and it could churn a whole new world in your brain. Nothing I've ever mentioned. I just simply give you the primer. And then it's like the tape runs out on this episode, right? Theme music's over and your brain is just off in a whole nother world. And you're thinking of things, again, I have never mentioned. You are literally Daniel Boone out there in the universe, attaching wires together and messing around with stuff. I'm giving you tools. You go create the solutions. You create the next level of science, next level of discovery. If you bump into someone who says you're crazy, whatever, that's their problem. If they want to debate you on something and they can change your mind about one of the connections, that's fine. That connection doesn't look like it attaches to the other thing. Maybe it does in a different condition, but right now with this is that and this is that, all these other conditions I made, it doesn't work. I'll come back to that. I'm going to go back to the beginning. If you've ever taught in your life or had teachers in your family, one of the things that they'll teach you really quickly, and what's funny is no one has to tell you this. It's a cliche, and I guarantee you discover this cliche by yourself. The second you want to teach something is the day you realize you don't really understand it, or you do understand it. The first time I started teaching classes, you get this weird insecurity, like, oh my God, do I understand this enough to really teach it to other people? Eventually you go, shit, yeah, I do. Or a question comes at you from the audience, and you're like, oh yeah, well, I wasn't going to talk about that, but if you're interested in it, how many people are interested in that? And they all raise their hands, and you're like, okay, great. We're going to spend 15, 20 minutes in this other area since everyone's interested. And then you just bake it into your agenda, into your syllabus. Anyway, I know you guys feel me. You guys are the minds that think like this. That's why you're here. My goal is to keep your brain going, keep your brain thinking. All subjects in life. Anyhow, if you haven't gone to deepthoughtsradio.com, please do. There are at least 320 episodes up there for you to listen to. Only a few of you have made it through all of it. For those of you who've made it through all of it, I think I'll create a t-shirt for you guys. Just to get yourself a little trophy, because that's quite an accomplishment, man. But the website has the audio, the video, the locked Facebook group, the Patreon page, and the store. So until we meet again, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.